All right, so I just filmed a pretty stereotypical YouTube video talking about the Viltrox 13mm F1.4, and basically talking about why I upgraded from this to this from the Rokinon, the trusty Rokinon 12mm F2, and just how good this lens works with the X-H2S, to see if this lens introduces any kind of wobbles in the corners when using it as a vlogging camera. And after I've basically filmed that whole thing, I started thinking to myself specifically about Fuji's new autofocus system and how they're supposedly working on bringing as much of the algorithm down to their older cameras like the X-T4 and X-T3. And I started to get excited thinking, I'd be able to use this lens with the X-T4 as a vlogging camera, because this lens is relatively a pretty big prime in the Fuji system. So if I could pair it up with a smaller camera instead of the X-H2S, that would be a much more, smaller form factor that I could run around with if I wanted to vlog. Then I started thinking, I was like, well, the thing that sucks about the X-T4 is that the IBIS in that system tends to wobble. And with the new X-H2S, it does have an improved IBIS system, and that's probably what's preventing this lens and this camera from wobbling. So I decided to put this lens on the X-T4 now and just kind of try it out, see how bad those wobbles were. And to my surprise, the stabilization and the wobbles were just about pretty close to what it looked like on the X-H2S. So then I started thinking, I was like, well, I have seen wobbles introduced into some of my footage, even just from using this 18-55 on the X-T4. It's also wobbled quite a bit on the Rokinon 12mm that I have as well. So then I started to think, like, well, what's been improved, right? So has the IBIS on the X-T4 been improved, or is this lens have more to it than just autofocus software in it, right? Is it, you can upgrade with the USB-C port that's on the bottom of the camera and upgrade its firmware. So is this lens have some type of firmware that's working with the cameras to prevent those wobbles? I don't know. So that kind of just led me to the question of this video. Does this lens specifically not wobble on Fuji cameras because of the communication between the cameras, or what is it? Or has Fuji cameras just gotten better? Which I don't really necessarily know the answer to, but all I know is that the wobbles using this lens on either of these cameras is pretty controlled, and something I would gladly use on either camera. So, which is just kind of crazy to say. So like I thought the extra half a stop in the X-H2S, which the technology it had to add that half a stop, is probably what is allowing it to maybe control the wobbles a little bit more. I don't know. I thought it was that, but again, it could be that update in IBIS could have been brought over to the X-T4 on its last update. I don't know. It was never really mentioned. I don't think. I could be wrong. But yeah, this lens is doing extremely well for as wide as it is, and is definitely a viable option for vlogging on the Fuji system. All right, now there is quite a bit of a disclaimer when it comes to at least how I vlog in the footage that you're seeing of me running around with the camera. I try it as much as I can. I try to absorb the amount of vibrations and like the steps that I'm taking with like my shoulder and my elbow. So for example, if I'm holding the camera out like this, I'm going to be trying to absorb as much as I can with my elbow and my shoulder, basically trying to use them like a 2-axis gimbal and try to really absorb the amount of vibrations and shock that I am from walking around or whenever I'm moving or turning or anything like that. I'm never ever vlogging like this. So for the people who are making videos and the footage is super shaky, I understand there are micro jitters that, especially after holding the camera for a long time, your hand's going to start to shake a little bit. But again, I'm constantly trying to switch hands, or I'm absorbing again from my shoulder. So maybe that's what's preventing the wobbles in my footage. If, maybe the footage that's out there is user error. I don't know. But I just had to point that out because I can't stand those reviews of people just shaking this thing to the point of almost breaking it and then saying something like, oh, it's just not right for the way I shoot. Like, when are you ever shooting trying to break your damn camera? So again, that's just how I vlog, and I'm always trying to be as smooth as I can with my camera. So that might be a factor into it, maybe not. I do shake it a little bit in the footage you're gonna see, but again, I didn't want to do that too much because that's not realistic for how I vlog. So take that for what you will. Alright, so I don't know what happened to the audio cable for this microphone, but the audio was wrecked on this clip. So I'm just going to do a little voiceover. Basically, all I was saying is that I'm using the Viltrox 13 on the XH2S, and also right here I'm explaining that I'm trying to compensate with my arm as much as possible with these vibrations. And as I walk around right here, I'm basically saying that I'm also kind of doing like the ninja walk, to try to remove as much vibration as possible. And this is again what I normally do when I am trying to vlog, try to remove those vibrations as much as possible for my viewers. So with that said, all I'm basically doing here is just kind of running back and forth between like my office and my loft to kind of show you, to try to basically force the camera to wobble is what I'm trying to do, right? So a lot of the back and forth vibrations right here you're seeing is the movement that I did and got the most vibration or most warping from the XT4 and the Rokinon 12mm. That combo was the worst by far, but that back and forth motion is when I noticed the wobbles the most. This part specifically, I am shaking the camera. Again, that's not something I normally do when I vlog, but I wanted to try again. I'm just trying to get the camera to warp as much as possible, and I handled that extremely well. The only time I feel like I ever really notice warping with this camera is when I'm like pulling the camera up to where I'm, where it's going to be when I'm vlogging. Like, so when I'm lifting the camera up, when I'm getting the camera like situated. So I thought I'd put this little clip in there to show you that it's just, the camera and a microphone, right? And I mainly wanted to show that specifically because the stabilization on the XH2S is super impressive. Like, it is, dare I say, almost gimbal-like. Again, now I'm trying to absorb as much of the vibrations as possible, try to make it as smooth as possible. But it is extremely smooth for it just being the only stabilization on this camera. There's no gimbal, there's no image stabilization on the lens, and there's no post stabilization on anything you're seeing here or any of the shots that I showed you in this video. So I gotta say I'm impressed not only from the lack of warping, but how smooth this IBIS is. So to answer the question, the title of this video, does the Viltrox wobble on Fuji cameras? I'm going to say no. The answer is no. It is exceptionally well when on the XH2S, as it should be. It's the new camera, it's the flagship, new technology, it's great. On the XT4, it's also really good as well. There's just the slightest bit of wobble that you're barely even going to notice. You're not going to get sick watching it for long periods of time like some other YouTubers have been doing. Peter McKinnon, you're my guy. You're a big inspiration, but man, your camera just wobbles like crazy. Especially if you have seen his most recent videos where he's moving into his like new temporary studio. He's just outside vlogging, standing, and man, it's nauseating to say the least. It's bad. Now I know he's using a much wider lens on his cameras. He's using like a 15 or 16mm on a full frame camera, and the Viltrox 13mm is like a 19 or a 20 full frame equivalent, and the Rokinon 12 is more like an 18mm equivalent. But still, they're still considered ultra wides, and those wobbles are still pretty controlled for as wide as these lenses are. But again, chalking it up to kind of user error, working with your camera's weaknesses, you can kind of compensate as much as you can to prevent this type of issue happening to your footage. So take that for what you will. I definitely wasn't really expecting to kind of go this route with this video, but I'm glad I did, and I hope you guys got something out of it. If you did, definitely hit that like button. It is much appreciated. And subscribe for more content just like this. Again, I just got the Fujifilm XH2S, so I'm still testing that. Still got a lot of footage, a lot more content planned specifically for that camera. And if you want to see more Viltrox 13mm footage, I'll probably be vlogging with that. I might even set it up as my main lens for this setup right here. So again, there's a lot more content coming, so definitely subscribe if you guys want to see more, but that's it for this one. I'll catch you guys later.